Myles Garrett, DK Metcalf, Geno Smith, just a few of the big names we heard all about this week as teams head into the new league year and free agency gets rolling. Many would tell you these teams are making huge mistakes. Why would they do this? Well, let me say this again. These front offices know better than you. The time, effort, planning, and team building these franchises exercise every day is to put the best team on the field this fall. So ultimately, it doesn't matter if you understand it or not. For the real football people out there, do your best to ignore the clickbait by so many of these NFL experts and buckle up for today's episode where we will actually talk to former NFL GM Jon Robinson, someone who has actually been in the big seat, had success, and knows what it actually takes to win in the NFL here on Scouting the League. Everyone, and welcome to what may be the most high-profile guest we have had on Scouting the League to this date, Jon Robinson, former GM of the Tennessee Titans. He joins Neil and I to talk all things franchise building, roster management, draft, and a little bit of everything. Before we get to Jon, though, let me remind you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast wherever you are listening and watching. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Megaphone, YouTube, or anywhere else. Give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and make sure you share with a friend. You will hear items on this program that you will not hear anywhere else. We get into everything football. We do not do things just for clickbait or to create hot headlines and get feedback. Just real football talk with people who live in the industry. Joined, as always, by co-host Neil Stratton, who is Inside the League, at Inside the League on X, and InsideTheLeague.com is his website. Make sure you also check out his blog, SucceedInFootball.com. I am Rodrik David, at RightStepADV on X. RSAFootball.com is my website. And want to give a quick shout to Scouts. If you haven't already, head over to thescoutingcommunity.com. Get signed up for the scouting community. Salary and data survey, insurance and financial planning, mentorship, and so much more. An exclusive community for scouts only. Yes, you must be an NFL scout to join this part of the scouting community. Sign up today. That is at thescoutingcommunity.com. And for aspiring scouts, we have a spot for you as well, the aspiring scout community. Also, head over to thescoutingcommunity.com, scroll down just a little bit lower on the page and sign up. For aspiring scouts, we will be doing some things to get you on the path toward achieving your NFL scouting dream, furthering that dream, or just learning and talking ball. All of that can be found at thescoutingcommunity.com. And to today's guest, Jon Robinson, a man whose humble beginnings in Union City, Tennessee, took him to Southeast Missouri State before a brief stop at Nicholls State. From there, it was a long run with the Patriots in several roles before joining Jason Licht in Tampa Bay, where he served as the director of player personnel. He was then named the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, where he was in charge until 2022. You most certainly saw Jon's name up for a few of these GM spots in the most recent cycle, and he is certainly a name that you will continue to see in the football world for a while. Well, Jon, welcome to Scouting the League.
Hey guys, what's up? Appreciate you having me on.
Glad to have you, buddy.
It is awesome to have you again. A former GM, a guy that knows football, been in a bunch of really successful spots. Came from humble beginnings. Union City, Tennessee, Southeast Missouri State. Talk about your origin story. First of all, getting into scouting, because again, when you got into scouting, it was before everybody and their brother-in-law wanted to be a scout. So talk us through kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, right. If you'd have told me 40 years ago that, an old hayseed from West Tennessee who grew up in factories and fields was going to run one of 32 teams, I'd have probably called you crazy. But I was very blessed. I was fortunate. I told my daughter, I got one daughter in college now and one that's going to be in 2 years. And, I think one of the most important things about your education is meeting people along the way that can help you. That's worth its weight in gold, because unless you're going to be a mathematician or some scientist, I got a math degree. I couldn't solve a calculus problem to save my life, but I met people along the way that afforded me opportunities to grow into a profession that I love. So yeah, as you said, started at SEMO, played there, GA'd there, got a degree in math education. As I said, I wanted to teach and coach. That's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a high school football coach and teach math. I figured I could open up the old Rand McNally. Scouts probably don't know what a Rand McNally. Some don't now. They have ways and apps, but I had a map, not an app. And I could point to any city in the country and I could go get a job teaching and coaching. Took a turn, went to beautiful Nicholls State down in Homa, or in Thibodaux, Louisiana.
Absolutely.
I say that slightly in jest. It's a cool part of the country, but I met my wife there, which was awesome, and I got to meet Jason Licht, and that was really the springboard for me. Was kind of being the pro liaison. I dealt with the scouts. Rest in peace, CO Ricardo. CO would roll in the old Crown Vic, and he'd come out with all of this Oilers gear, Titans gear, whatever they were that year. And I got to know all those guys, all the old school guys, and I would take care of them. I would send them video, and my relationship with Jason kind of blossomed from there. He recommended me to New England, and Scott Pioli and Bill took a chance on me. They dumped me right into the hotbed of the Southeast. I didn't know anything, but I had a bunch of good dudes that were on the road and kind of showed me the ropes. And I kind of grew from there. I almost quit my first year too. The old Fairfield ends and the quarters in the washing machine on a Saturday after watching a game got to be a little old. And but something told me to stick with it, and was able to grow there, and then to Tampa, and then to Tennessee. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that as we go here.
John, obviously that was Bill Belichick was not who we think of when we think of Bill Belichick now. Did you have any idea that you're entering, that you kind of gotten a golden ticket by getting in on the ground floor of the Patriots at that time?
Well, they had just won the Super Bowl, Neil, in New Orleans. So I knew that, and I was green, right? I was 22, 23 years old as a first-time scout. And I knew they had a good team. But looking back, I don't think I knew at the time the ability and as many good players that were on that team, right? Because you can have a team that's loaded with talent, but they're not really a good team. Mm-hmm. And then you can have a team like that was a really good team, and they had some budding superstars, but it wasn't like they had a bunch of household names at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, again, you think about those early 2000 Patriots teams. Again, the Patriots dynasty of the 20 years, those early years, it was the Bruschi, Vrabel, McGinnis, Seymour, young Tom Brady, not the Tom Brady that we all know and appreciate today. And again, the evolution of what Bill did, what Scott, what you, what Jason, Nick, all these guys we're going to talk about that were Patriots. Again, the evolution of the philosophy in New England on how we're going to build this team. Heavy defense to, hey, now the Randy Moss and Tom Brady years. Talk about that, again, just that evolution with those people as, again, New England lost front office guys every year. You lose high-paid free agents every year. You lose coaches every year. That evolution of, again, the way you kind of built the team and saw that team being built in front of you.
Yeah, I think the one constant that Bill did an outstanding job of is, we were able to keep the quarterback in place, right, in all of those years. And there was some succession plan offensively from a language standpoint, right? So it was Charlie Weiss, who leaves, but we had, Josh, and then it was Bill O'Brien, and then it was Josh back. And then it was like, you think about quarterback play today, it's paramount in the league, right? You've got to have a good quarterback in order to make it. And we're going to take this quarterback who's playing at pick a school, and he's steeped in French, All right. But our playbook is Russian. All right. And we're going to try to teach that player a whole different language. I think it's paramount that, and that's what we were able to do. We were able to keep it the Patriot lingo for all of those years. And you're just adding to it, right? You're learning another word, like you're learning another foreign language, and you're just adding that to your vocabulary. Whereas, when you get these young quarterbacks now and you try to cram a foreign language down their throat, and they're looking like they don't know if it's, middle field open or middle field closed because the play call is a paragraph. They're used to looking over at the sideline at a poster board with a duck and a boat horn on it. And it's like it tells them to throw it to that guy. Well, that's not how the league works. But we were fortunate in New England to have that the succession plan that Bill, we're just going to give it to this coach and give it to this coach and give it to this coach. So we're able to build on that vocabulary offensively, through the years.
Yeah. And again, that you talk about the two constants in there. Again, it's always going to be Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, those guys, the two constants for the, really the full run. And again, you've got strong voices on the defense. Bill's always going to have his, hands in that. And then again, Tom, like you said, with the quarterback on the other side of it. And again, the success and the back and forth that Neil and I playfully have, again, who is more important in the success over 20 years. And I don't think you can separate them. It is a disservice to either guy to say it was more Bill or it was more Tom. Again, it took 53 plus the coaching staff plus the front office to have a sustained run like that again, New England really kind of unprecedented. Maybe Kansas City flirting with it a little bit now, but again, it's just really unprecedented what they did over the year, what you did, again, being a big part of it for all the years you were.
I was just a lowly scout. I didn't have much to do with it. I just wrote reports.
That's the true humility that we love on Scouting the League.
I said when I was done, I was going to get the old gang back together. We were going to write a book called "Thank God for 12" and Belichick.
A lot of checks were cashed on those two.
That's right. I was going to say we got a lot of playoff checks because of those two guys.
No question.
Let's talk about some of those. We love to talk about general managers. Obviously, you were one. I know that no one gets there by themselves. There are a lot of people that you've been exposed to, John, that you probably took a little element from each of them. I'm going to throw some names at you as some of the bigger names in that seat that have been around the game. Obviously, Belichick. What did you take from Bill into Nashville with you?
Yeah, I think I've been asked this before. I think the biggest thing that I tried to do was everybody wants to talk about leadership, right? And it's just like, well, what kind of leader are you? Leader. And I think you either have leadership or you don't have leadership. I think people either look to you as a leader or they don't. I think if you have to stand in front of them in the room and announce that you're the leader, then you're really not the leader, right? So everybody knew that Bill was a leader, and Bill didn't have to announce that. And I knew that football team and trying to touch or get at least as close to perfect as possible was so important to him. So I kind of took the avenue of doing my job, whether it was an area scout or a national scout or the college director, and trying to be the best that I could to not let Bill down. I knew when Bill looked at my work, I wanted him to say, like, I see it. And he might disagree with the value that I put on the player. That happens, right?
Right.
But at least he knew I was going to be exhaustive in the report or setting the board for him or whatever it was. And that's what I tried to take to Nashville and to my brief stop in Tampa was working with a passion and a vision and having all of those people who worked alongside me. Nobody worked for me. We all worked for the team. Having those people that worked alongside me not want to let me down or the team down. And that's probably the biggest thing that I took from Bill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I believe you crossed paths with Tom. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go Neil.
I believe you crossed paths with Tom Heckert in Philadelphia. Did he make a big impression on you, John?
I never worked with Tom.
Okay.
But I knew Tom, and I knew Tom he's touched a lot of people in this league. Very caring dude, just a salt of the earth guy that treated people the right way. And I know a lot of people that have worked alongside him. I knew him. I didn't work for him, but I know that he's held in high regard, and I held him in high regard as a personnel man, just for the way he went about doing his business.
How about now? I don't know did you work with Howie Roseman in Philadelphia?
No, I traded with Howie a lot.
Okay. Well, you probably got a good taste of him that way then.
You win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned Jason. Tom Dimitroff, I think you worked with him in New England?
Yeah, Tommy. So Thomas was the college director when I was a national scout. And it's kind of crazy how it went down, because he got the Atlanta job on the Super Bowl run. We were actually headed to Arizona, and we had meetings coming up. I mean, when you make it to the big game, then you're not behind as a scout, but like you're trying to catch some of the coaches up, and we're trying to catch Scott up. And excuse me. So when he bounced, we had meetings, and Thomas always ran those meetings, and me and Bob Quinn was doing some pro, and he was doing some college too. So we were kind of void of a director. And I think that when Thomas left, like I just kind of stepped up and took on and kind of ran the meetings. And then Scott came to me and said, "Hey, you really did a good job. Would you like to be the director?" And then, the rest is history. But Thomas was, first off, his vocabulary is way better than mine. Like he knows words that I can't even spell. But he is very thorough. He's very exhaustive. He's, I know he's working with Sumer now in this analytical piece. He was kind of forward thinking even back then with trying to integrate some of that stuff. So, but a really good leader. We all really respected Thomas. He was a great communicator with us, and he had a heck of a run in Atlanta too.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, Thomas had, you could certainly understand. I could see the forward think again, even if he wanted to just dabble and see again, what new pieces, analytic, data, video, again, is the, kind of the 3D, the Oculus. Again, he wanted to at least kick the tires on everything in Atlanta. And again, by the time I got there in 2016, he had really developed kind of the way he was going to do things. And again, even over the next 4 or 5 years, you saw it. But again, what he's doing with Sumer now fits him perfectly. Again, forward thinking, outside the box, again, not afraid to kind of go against the grain a little bit. And again, hard to argue if you're a GM anywhere for around 10 plus years, 5+ years, again, that's a successful run. And Thomas certainly had that in Atlanta. And again, alongside you, name keeps popping up as, hey, has had success in the NFL, won playoff games, and again, deserves to have conversations. Another one, again, that you've got to work with, Nick Caserio, obviously down in Houston now. He's got Pierce, his quarterback. It looks like he's got the right head coach paired with it. What is going to help Nick and allow Nick to continue to be successful?
Yeah, Nick probably is the hardest worker of anybody that I've ever worked with. Like, I mean, I don't know if he sleeps. Like, because I mean, he truly is exhaustive to the point where, I mean, I think when he was a quality control coach, because he started out in coaching, and he actually coached the receivers, I think in 2007. Maybe I've got this right. The year we were undefeated, I don't know how much coaching he had to do. He had Randy Moss and Welker, especially like go get open guys. So I'm just kidding, Nick. If you're listening, you're probably not. He passed out one time in the thing because he didn't sleep. Because I mean, Charlie Weiss or somebody, Mangini had him drawing cards, till the wee hours of the morning. And he's like, he's extremely healthy. He's extremely fit. He eats like twigs and all of this fibery stuff. I can't do it. I got to have a cheeseburger occasionally, more than occasionally. But he's extremely smart. He's extremely hardworking. he's going to do everything. And I think you can see it with some of the moves that he's made. He's not afraid to pull the trigger, whether it was signing Diggs last year or a couple years ago moving, taking Stroud, and then out of nowhere, boom, jumping back up to, I think it was 3 when they took Anderson, the edge guy out of Bama. Like, he's not afraid to move and be aggressive to try to put the team in a position to try to win, and really he's forward thinking from a contract standpoint. If you look at what he did with Nico Collins, got out ahead of that one, right? So, I mean, I'm sure Cincinnati wish they had got out ahead of a couple of guys they're trying to re-sign, but it is what it is. So, kudos to Nick for kind of trying to stay one step ahead of the forecast of where where the money's going.
Yeah. I want to circle back on Jason. Cause again, not only is he a fellow Nebraska Wesleyan guy like myself, but I would say of the GMs that have now won Super Bowls and been in a spot for a while, again, it is, the Bucks have won a couple of division titles in a row with relatively low expectations. They've reset the quarterback. They were patient with the head coach. Again, they've got a good roster. They've got a good team coming back. They're always going to be competitive. And Jason is kind of down there just doing his thing, operating that franchise, keeping it going forward. Talk about what has, again, allowed Jason to, navigate some of those turbulent waters that you're going to have in the run of a GM.
Yeah, he's again. I learned a ton from him. I owe him everything. You gave me an op, like I said earlier. But when I kind of went with him, I stayed in New England through that. I think it was the 13 draft. It was the Mike Evans draft. When he took Mike Evans, I was still in New England, and he had signed a bunch of free agents that some worked out, some didn't work out, but we knew. And then we had the number 1 pick next year. We took Jameis, and then we were able to add Donovan Smith and Ali Marpet. We were able to start adding some dudes that were going to kind of be a part of the build. But kudos to the Glazer family for being patient with Jason, right? Because we weren't really good, and it was going to be a long process build wise, and it took them 4 or 5 years to get somewhat competitive, and then you land Tom and you're able to add Gronk, and boom, you get a Super Bowl. And now he's been able to supplement it with Godwin, and like you said, switching players with Baker, and he's knocked some drafts out of the park. So, but that's rare in the GM chair, right? To get 5 years of maybe 4 years, whatever it is, of not being successful, and ownership staying the course with you, right? To trust you to keep moving forward. So, and it's certainly paid off for them and their fans down there in Tampa, and him and Greenberg and all those guys down there. Got a ton of respect for them, and wish them nothing but the best.
Yeah, and they get John Spytek out to Las Vegas now, again continuing to put people that were underneath Jason in that big chair. Let's talk about kind of where that GM direction is going. Again, the days of road scout, national scout, director, again, the scouting background. Again, it used to be thought of as the traditional way to do it. Howie Roseman obviously has really shown us, hey, complete exception. Brett Veach has done a really good job. And now we've got, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. We've got the James Gladstone in Jacksonville now, where the background doesn't have to be, and maybe it's a positive when you were not viewed as a scout, but a really smart, put together, you can run meetings, you can manage all these different areas, but it's different. Talk about where this GM position is going, where owners are going with it. And again, do you view it as a positive, as, hey, there's going to be road bumps? Kind of how do you see all of it?
Yeah, I think, that's a great point, Roderick. Like it used to be where if it was hard for a pro scout to kind of, or a pro director to kind of get into the GM chair, because there was so much, put on the draft, and we're going to build, because everybody says the same thing, right? When you get the job, it's like, we're going to be a build. I mean, look at every single press conference of every single GM, and they're going to say the same thing. I mean, it's copy paste, right? we're going to build through the draft. We're going to reward it's the same thing. So I think for the longest time, to your point, it was very scout college centric, right? And, with the evolution of analytics, although analytics has been around forever, right? Like it's like statistic and analyzing numbers, that's gone on forever. Mm-hmm. It's just, it's the new thing, right? And metric, and you've got all this stuff in game. I mean, I get a headache sometimes watching these games where they put these dots on these guys. I just want to watch the play, and I'm trying to look at this red dot. It's like, I'm like a dog chasing that thing. When you put it down on the ground, you're looking at the red dot.
Chase the laser beam.
That's it. So I do think that there's this kind of trend where numbers and all of this next gen and PFF and all of this stuff, it's so prevalent, and the impact of social media, that this information is at your fingertips really sometimes when the play's over. I mean, you run a series and there's somebody somewhere metric in it, and they've tweeted something out, or is it X'd out now that it's X? I don't know, whatever. And this is consumable information.
Yeah.
So I think that owners are looking now. I can't speak for them. I'm not one, but this new trend of taking this broad scope view of scouting and managerial and able to incorporate the metric piece to building a team. And I do think it's interesting too that they're dividing out the GM role a little bit, right? Where you see it in Carolina, they're doing it in Jacksonville, where you have Tony and you have James, and Tony's over a piece and James is over a piece, where the GM is really more over now the true personnel and the roster, whereas the old school, which was kind of what I was, like, you are over everything football. Yeah. So the game has changed so much, and there's so many different departments. It really is it's a two-person operation for it to function correctly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So talk about that piece of it again. If you're in the chair now as a GM, what percentage of time do you think you are spending doing, again, roster building, team building, focusing on the product on the field, again, dabbling with the coaching staff, as opposed to how much you're spending on everything else, stadium operations, equipment, new projects, technology? Like, where does your time actually go these days?
Well, I think now, if you're going to build it the way, it appears that, the Jacksonville and Carolina and some of the other teams are, it's probably going to be 75 to 80%, where you're just focusing on the roster, right? Because you have somebody else that's in charge of, equipment and grounds and player engagement and all of that. So you might be a liaison there. There's going to be this communication piece because it all touches the players, it all touches football, but you're not necessarily in the nuts and bolts, right? It's not like, you're going to have to spend 45 minutes with the grounds crew talking about tearing out the centers of the fields because it's November and they're worn out and we've got 4 sprinkler heads. When can we get the tractor in there? Like, somebody else is doing that, right? Yeah. So that you're watching practice squads, you're looking at your, upcoming opponents, seeing their free agents, so that when you go to the game, you can kind of pay attention to certainly your players, but you're looking at some of the maybe possible free agent guys that are out there running around too.
Jon, let's talk a little bit about scouting philosophy. I think the pattern in the past has always been you put your youngest guy in the Northeast, you've got a more senior guy in the Southeast and maybe the Midwest. You're going to have a guy on the West Coast who's kind of been out there for a long time, because that's a little bit of a different animal. But we're seeing more often now, at least I'm seeing, a lot younger people going into the Southeast. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe it's because it's a bigger area to cover. Maybe because there's a familiarity with the GM or what have you. If you were doing it today, how would you set up your staff as far as who's covering what, who's the most senior guys, those kind of things, if you were doing it today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you could probably ask, 20 different people, you get 20 different answers, maybe 10 different answers, who knows? But I'm still kind of rooted. I'm still a little bit old school, Neil. I know that the Southeast is probably the most talent rich area. So I'm going to put my best hunting dog down there. Like I said, I'm from West Tennessee. I'm an old country dude. Like, you put your best dog on the hottest trail, like, and let him go get that one. Mm-hmm. So in the Northeast, there's not as many prospects. So I don't necessarily have to be a young guy, but it's somebody that's kind of learning how to do it. I do think the most important thing when you're structuring the department, at least now, the way I look at it, the area scouts, 70 to 80% of their evaluation on how good a job they do is how in-depth can they get on the background, the information, the character. Does the guy love ball? Is he going to be a fit? And on the evaluation piece, if they can at least hit the dartboard, we'll figure it out. We got time to watch the film. But, like, I want you to bring everything you can to the table about the dude.
Yes.
So we get that, at least as much information so that we can make an accurate decision.
Yeah.
And then your national guys, I always believed in 2 national guys. Those guys got to be closer to the bullseye, on the dartboard. And really their information and their background is really supplementing what the area scouts bring to the table. And we got to a point in Tampa and in New England where we would put on the report so that everybody could see it, who they talk to, not necessarily name. SC would be strength coach, TR would be trainer, PC would be position coach. So if the area scout has already talked to these 3 people, all right, well, when the national scout goes through there, maybe he bumps into the equipment guy, or maybe he tries to get with the head coach, something, so that we have as many touch points on these players as possible. And you see it in pro football, and it's certainly the same in college football. There's so many more people that touch the players, right? From a player engagement person to, like, who's doing their who's the NIL stuff. So who's negotiating with the guy? Like, you got to talk to these guys now as a scout, because that's another piece of the puzzle when you're trying to, create a profile on the player. So that's kind of how, I would organize it, with those job descriptions being probably more important than who's doing what area, if that makes sense.
John, I think about when I was on the road, and again, you're tight-knit as a scouting staff within a building, the 10 to 12 college scouts, again, your area scouts, regional, national. But in Atlanta, you're not finding out what a lot of your other scouts know until maybe December, maybe January, February meetings. But today's world, especially with the transfer portal, means that a lot of these schools don't know their players very well. Again, a guy goes from the West Coast to the Midwest to the Southeast to the Southwest, where if your scouts within a scouting department are not communicating earlier in the process, you're going to leave a lot of questions left to be answered until the spring process, when it becomes harder to answer them. How do you think teams have to address the watered down and really just the lack of depth of information that any one school is going to have on some of these top guys, because they end up at 2 or 3 places in 2 or 3 years of college?
Yeah, I think that's where it's you're trying to evaluate your scouts, right, and how good a job they're doing, but you've got to give them some ammunition to do their job. So I didn't want this whole cloak and dagger game of, this scout heard that his grandmother is really the one, and you show up for December meetings and the scout's got his chest stuck out like he's got this scoop. Well, let's just put your initials. If it's James Jones, I talked to this guy and here's what he said about the guy's grandmother. It's on your report, so that the next scout that goes through there, maybe he knows somebody on staff a little better than James does, and he can dig into another source about that, right? So I never wanted to individualize the scouting process, right? Because that's no different than the team, right? You're not going to individualize the team. It takes 11 dudes on defense to make plays. It takes 11 on offense. Well, it takes the entire scouting staff now with, to your point, the way these guys are bouncing around from school to school to really get an accurate profile on the player. So let's all work together like we're asking the team to do so that we can just get it right. At the end of the day, we just want to try to get it right.
Yeah.
More than we get it wrong.
Yeah. Getting it right, again, that is what used to be talked about. You could disagree on a report. You could disagree on where we value a player. At the end of the day, when that card is pulled, he's now ours. He is a Titan. He is a Falcon. He's a Patriot. And again, you kind of wait to see. Again, I disagreed. I thought this character thing was going to pop up, whatever it may be. But again, he's yours now. And again, to your point, it takes everybody. It takes an entire front office. Or have you noticed a trend, even, again, going back from the time that you started to where, again, the last couple of years where the desire for me to look really good as an individual scout so I can land my next job, is that maybe lack of humility or that desire to move up? Is that kind of taking a front seat sometimes to sharing information and doing what's right for the team?
Well, I think the one thing that I tried to do, whether it was in Tampa or Tennessee, was to empower the scouts, right? I used to tell them all the time, you've got the pen. Like you have to, when you're writing this evaluation, you're writing this report, whether it's the character, whether it's the evaluation, you got to paint a picture as if I know nothing about the player. And I want to visually see the guy as a person walking around our building, how he's going to carry himself, and how he's going to perform on the field through your words. So I was really proud of those staffs because I felt like we really worked together as a unit, right? As opposed to, one scout always trying to be the lead dog or feeling like they had all the information.
Yeah.
So I will say one of the guilty pleasures, though, as the GM was in draft meetings, we'd be going through the board and I would already have earmarked like 2 guys that we had graded low that I liked better. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we wouldn't talk. I mean, sometimes they'd be on our free agent board. We have them buried. And we'd get through a position group. And I'd be like, well, John Salge, who was the college director, or Ryan Cowden or Monty Ossenford, they would go, anybody got anybody else? And I would always pop up and like, where's so-and-so from XYZ state? And then the area scout, they would start scrambling for their notebook and they'd be like, oh, I got even free agent. He's free agent. He'd be a good free agent though. And I'd be like, I must have watched the wrong tape. And I would just stop. And they would be like,
oh yeah.
Want to crawl into a hole.
No.
So John, I think the 3 gateways, if you will, in the scouting projection are getting hired as a scouting assistant, going from scouting assistant and getting an area, and then distinguishing yourself as an area scout enough to be a national guy. What were you looking for at all 3 of those entry points as far as when you're deciding, okay, this guy's ready, he's worthy of being hired, ready to get an area, and ready to become a national guy? And were they different things you were looking for?
Absolutely. I think that we interviewed a lot of scouting assistants in May, right after the draft. That's kind of when those positions kind of turn and become available. And I never hired a person that when they sat in front of me for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was, if I would ask them what their goal is, if they said, well, I want to sit in your chair one day, I never hired them. We never hired them. Because, and this is we could talk for 2 hours about this, because I think this is a societal issue, right? People now want to go from here to here, right? They don't want to step on the rungs of the ladder. They just want to take the escalator to the top without having to do any work. So I was looking for somebody to say, I have a passion for pro football. I want to work in the NFL, whatever role that you see fit for me to do, whether it be in pro or be in college. I want to learn the scouting process. I want to be a part of a team. Boom. That's what I'm looking for. As an area scout, it's really their ability to be self-sufficient, right? Because you're basically an independent contractor. You get your list of guys. Here's your schools you got to hit. And you've got to be self-disciplined to hit those schools and get back to the Fairfield Inn, or if you're a Hilton guy, the Hampton Inn, whatever it is, and crank on those reports at 9 o'clock till 11, 12, shut it down, get up the next day, pack your bag, go do it again. So it's really the ability to be self-disciplined, self-motivated, self-sufficient, and get your work done in a timely fashion. And then from a national scout standpoint, it's all of that plus your ability to multitask, right? Are you staying, because now you're communicating with the scouts that you're kind of going over the top of, you're communicating with the college director. So there's a little bit more to the role because there's more communication pieces involved. The scouting assistant, you're trying to get in and you're trying to learn. The area scout, you're trying to be an expert in your area and have everything buttoned up on a daily basis. And then the national scout, you're really trying to do the area scout's job to a degree, but also be this communication piece between the directors and the scouts.
Yeah. Within each one of those roles, again, being a scout is a full-time job, much less working to improve yourself in whatever. If I need to learn, source development, if I want to become a better evaluator with this position or that position, I want to communicate better. What did you find yourself doing either in New England, Tampa, or Tennessee to develop your scouts? If there was a spot where it's like, hey, you're really strong here, but we got to develop you here, because again, there is not a ton of time during the year. You want to give people their summer vacations or their time away from football to kind of decompress before they do it all again. What were you doing to develop your scouts at any level?
Yeah, we would always have projects, whether it was in the really after the draft. Sometimes we'd stick around after the draft for a week, or really during training camp, where we'd have projects, and we would go back and watch. I looked at everything in kind of 2-year windows. Sometimes you have rookie sensations, but generally it takes 2 years for players to kind of get acclimated to at least what it looks like they're going to be as pro players. And we would watch, a set of guys at various positions who, maybe we graded high that performed at that level, some that didn't. And then conversely, some guys that we had graded lower, there maybe are overperforming where we had them valued. So I think the more that the college scouts can try to develop in their own time, I think it's important that you watch your own team, right? So if you don't know what your team is playing with, how can you go to a school and say, well, this guy is better than our third receiver, if you don't even know how good your third receiver is on your own team?
Yep.
So we would do some of those professional development things in training camp. So we're going back and looking at, all right, here's what we said about the player, and here's what it is. What can we kind of glean from that as we're about to hit the road and go hunt for the next crop? So, we try to change it up a little bit, and it's not like it's not a finger pointing session, right? They're just in there talking, all trying to get better. Because there's certainly guys that I miss on, looking back over my time. So
yeah, I think again, if you're scouting long enough, if you're scouting any duration of time, you're going to have guys you like that you're a little high on, and guys that you didn't like that you're a little low on. No question about that.
John, when you talked about the value of gathering character information as an area scout, were you a guy that, if someone came back and said, listen, this is a guy that I don't like from a character standpoint, or maybe he had some serious dings, were you a guy that took him completely off your board, or did you just move him down your board? We always hear about, well, this guy is a character risk or whatever. What did that mean to you? I guess I'm sure it depended on different things, but can you address that?
Yeah, we would just kind of leave them up there. at the value that they were as players, and we would flip them upside down, or we would put some kind of, notation on the card saying, hey, we're this is what the player is, but there's no way, we're going to bring that guy here. Simply because I wanted every player on the board, even the medical guys. If there was a medical guy that, our doctor said, no way, then we would just flip the guy upside down or make him red or something. So we never took guys off the board. They were on the board, but essentially they were noted that, they were no takes for us.
Yeah. So was that a guy a complete no-go, or was it a guy, hey, if we get to day 3 and he's still out there, maybe we roll the dice on the UDFA deal, or he's not going to be on our team at all?
Well, I think it's the severity of the person, right? It's like he's not very attractive on Friday night, but Saturday afternoon at 4:00 in the 7th round, he's starting to look a little bit better, So at that point, if you have to move on from the player, it's not costing you a ton. So it's the old risk reward, right? So I think those are. I can't give you really a broad answer for every person. It's really more about what are the issues and can we live with it to a certain degree.
Yeah. Again, putting that puzzle together for every prospect you have. Again, the puzzles look a lot different. Again, we see guys every year, they're getting hammered. There's, again, in true fashion, maybe 3/4 of the teams in the league have them off the board. Hey, we're not touching them here. But again, we all know there's a handful of franchises that can take those guys. They've had success with those guys. Everything is put in place for them off the field, coaching staff, player development, whatever it may be. There's some franchises that, again, were really good doing that. And you kind of pencil them in that, hey, this guy's going to fall to that franchise just because, again, they've got a bunch of those pieces in place. As you think about that character piece, as you're putting together your 53 now, Jon, again, that comes down to a lot of the coaching staff. Again, in a given year, 45, maybe 48 of your spots on your 53 are going to be pretty much spoken for by what they're putting on film. As you start to really think about the back end of that roster, putting, hey, those last 4 or 5, maybe developmental players, young players, role players, and then maybe starting practice squads have changed a little bit because they've expanded so much. But when you think about the guys that you're going to keep and pay, talk about how the character piece factors into those decisions and those conversations that you have come end of preseason time.
Yeah, I think that varies depending upon the position group that the player's in. What's the role of the player? If you have let's just say a really young defensive line group, right? And, you've got a young kind of developmental guy and you've got kind of an old seasoned vet. Well, if the seasoned vet is going to be kind of a mentor to, let's just say, the 6 that you're going to keep who are younger players, maybe you go with the older guy because he's going to be the uncle in there, kind of, hey, well, think about it like this, think about it like that, as opposed to putting another young guy in there, right? Maybe you need kind of a veteran piece in that meeting room. If you've got kind of an older position group, then do you really need to keep another old guy? You'd rather have a young developmental guy for those position players. And then you've got, your special teams guys. Like if you're a really good gunner, you can play a long time in the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that job. I mean, Matthew Slater is a perfect example.
Yep.
I think he's a Hall of Fame special teams player. And he was a really good gunner and a really good special teams guy for a lot of years. So having those, I would say, niche players that have those, those core roles on special teams, not taking your specialist out, the 3 that you got there. But I think it depends upon the position players, kind of the age of the group and the 1 or 2 that are battling for it. And then kind of those role players that you're going to need for those specific jobs when it comes to the kicking game.
Jon, we just handed the best draft award to the Rams, and the Rams are radically different, I think, and maybe on the leading edge in their philosophy. they're not sending many scouts, if any, to the combine. I mean, Teddy goes because he's got an area, he's got a group. They're not. I mean, more and more teams. I don't know if you've been going to the Senior Bowl recently, but Mobile's like a ghost town now. If you had a team now, would you start reflecting more of the, hey, listen, we don't have to have people all on the ground per se? Or are you still a guy, hey, let's send guys out and just see what they can gather, because being there has its advantages? What are your thoughts there?
I think I would probably lean more into the Senior Bowl of kind of doing it the old school way, right? Because you do get interview time, you do get to kind of divide up and watch position groups. You're actually seeing them play football, right? Whereas, the combine looks to me, and it's an important piece, right? But you get 15 minutes with them or 18 minutes with them, and then they're in the mosh pit, and every coach is trying to grab them. The scouts really don't have a ton of time to really interact with them, and then it looked to me like the interviews were done kind of early, and then they had the workouts, and then the scouts and the coaches really had nothing in the mornings until noon, right? So I would err on the side of maybe less at the combine, but still fully staffing the Senior Bowl to watch the practices and get those interactions, with the players.
Yeah, it's all changing. Go ahead, Neil.
Well, again, another kind of philosophical question. How much importance do you put on a scout having played the game? I mean, we look at Green Bay; they've got a lot of scouts that are ex-players in one form or fashion. But more and more, we're seeing a lot of guys that come up that really don't have a lot of background in the game. Maybe they've got a finance degree or a math degree or whatever. Where do you see the importance? Do you feel like actually having been in the game, been on the field, is something you still value a lot, or do you think that new trend is something that's worth exploring more?
Well, I think there's something to having played the game or been in the game. And I say that, not everybody's going to have been an All-American at Ohio State and then, be a scout, right? So, but I do think if the person was not really passionate or chasing a personnel role or a coaching role or a scouting role, right? They don't. There's an instinct thing, I think, that comes with scouting, right? Just like I think it's the same thing with play calling, right? It's just like some offensive coordinators are really good, or defensive coordinators or play callers, whatever it may be. They're really good on the whiteboard. They can draw this up to beat you here. But when it comes to the game, like, what is the situation? Like, are you playing in Miami where it's sunny and 75? Are you playing in Buffalo where it's freezing cold? And, they've got two starters down, and the blitz really didn't look good on Thursday when I drew up, but I think that thing's going to pop right here because they got this. So there's like a feel for it, right? So I think people that have been in personnel roles at colleges, or they've been around the game in some fashion, they not necessarily had to play the game, but they've been around the game and they kind of know the game. They have a feel for the game. I do think there's an importance to that. Yeah. Because that's where you can really kind of speak with conviction, because it's kind of in you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
John, as we sit here, talk about, again, a lot of on the college side, we're getting ready, new league year and free agency. We've already seen a massive Myles Garrett deal, a DK Metcalf trade, and getting paid. Free agency, again, is a huge part of how you're building a team. And despite what any player or agent or camp says, the dollars at the end of the day on the contract are probably going to dictate where guys go. As you're going from, we just got out of the combine, we're getting really into free agency. As a GM, how much time are you truly spending, if you want to call it recruiting or making your pitch, or is it really just a dollars and cents numbers contract language game as we get into free agency for these guys?
I think that, yeah, I mean, the dollars have gotten crazy, right? I mean, holy smokes. I I mean, Josh Allen just got redone, which kudos to Bean and those guys for that pick. That was great, worked out. But I think it's really, everybody talks about the waves of free agency. That first wave of free agency, the one that's going to hit, when does it start? When does the tampering window start? Today at noon or something?
Yes, I think so.
That's right.
You're gonna have a handful of deals that are done at 12:05.
Yep.
I mean, and realistically, they're probably already done.
Yep.
So I mean, let's just call it what it is. So I don't think there's a whole lot of recruiting there, but I do think in the second and third waves of free agency, you can bring guys in and you can talk about your roster and where you see them fitting. I do think there's a little bit more to recruiting in those waves, maybe than the first wave, because the first wave you're just buying, right? And then kind of the missed, I shouldn't say missed, but it's an overlooked opportunity of free agency is the post-draft free agency when you've got these veterans who are 28, 29, 30, maybe they've got a year or two left. You can get some really good players after the draft that can come in and be role players or spot players for pennies on the dollar compared to what you're going to pay for these guys, this afternoon by 3:00. So I think you have to be somewhat strategic in doing that. And then the other part is it's not really free agency, but it's the waiver process where you can claim guys at the end at the cut down. I mean, my first year in Tennessee, I think we we claimed one or two guys. A couple of them started for us, So there's that process that you're constantly looking and evaluating and trying to find fits for guys on your team for roles that you need. Maybe not to necessarily say be a 80% playtime guy, but let's go back through and talk about these guys who. There's a pool of players that maybe could come in and play 15, 20, 25% and give us a couple quality snaps, So that's really the kind of the over kind of encompassing thing of free agency. It's certainly all the big deals today and tomorrow, they get all the clicks, right?
Yep.
But sometimes the most important ones are the ones that you sign after you picked all your players in May and late April.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, those pro departments, which really get overlooked a lot of times, those guys that, again, they're not on the road, they're sitting in windowless offices, they're grinding film all season. And again, free agency comes and goes. And again, a lot of time their names don't go up in the lights. And thankfully Neil inside the league added those, again, that pro department staffs this year, those awards this year to kind of recognize those teams that, again, Green Bay doesn't, dabble in free agency a lot traditionally, but when they do, they hit on it. And again, I believe it was Washington and Minnesota both this year. Again, when you're going to do that, you better hit your dollars right, or again, it's going to set you back a year or two.
Yep, that's right.
John, we are seeing a lot of NFL type people come down and become GMs and highly placed members of executives of college teams now. Is that something you'd ever consider? Do you feel like you've got a good enough handle kind of on what the colleges are facing at the executive level and the team building level, especially in the NIL era, to where that's something that you'd feel comfortable doing?
I would probably have to work on my patience, Neil. I've got a couple of good friends that are in those roles, and it's unique from the standpoint until there are some bumpers or some guardrails put on it. You've got a team for 6 months, because as soon as that portal opens up, like you're constantly recruiting your own guys to keep them. I heard stories of players coming into the office and wanting a pay raise mid-season. Mm-hmm. It's like, and you can't. I used to say it all the time when you would extend players. If you start opening contracts up early, there's going to be a line down your hallway, right? Because everybody's going to want a piece. So when you start doing that in a college game, it's just like, but then you don't want to lose the player because if he's going to put his name in the portal just to see kind of what his value is, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't answer your question, Neil, but I think maybe at some point I would consider that, but I think I need to I don't say get more information because I know what the role would entail, but I think there just needs to be a little bit more parameters in place. Otherwise, it's just a constant free for all of, because you're really like a college department and a pro department, because you're not just evaluating the guy that put his name in the portal from Georgia. You're looking at, Valdosta State and Saginaw Valley. I mean, all of those guys. So you're having to turn over every single, nook and cranny looking at guys because you don't know where the next one is.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
John, football's a changing game. It's always going to change. Again, you talk NIL, you talk portal, you talk spread offense and quarterback run coming more to the NFL. Again, a guy like Jaden Daniels having the year he did last year. Football's always going to be changing. What do you see, whether college game, pro game, on the personnel side, on the coaching side? Where's the game of football going? Where should it go? Where do you not want to see it go in the next handful of years?
Well, I think the digital component has certainly made its way into the game, right? With pads on the sidelines. I think the college game, I may be mistaken, they can actually watch the plays on the sideline. Maybe not. I think in the pro game, it's still just the still shots. So I think the technology and all of that's still going to be. It's just going to continue to grow and be a part of the game. I mean, football is entertainment. And I say it all the time. We're in the sports entertainment. When I worked in the game, we're in the sports entertainment world, and you're trying to compete for dollars. You're either going to spend your dollars. Fans are going to spend their dollars on their pro team, on their college team. If they like music, they're going to follow whoever the latest Taylor Swift all around the country and listen to all of her. They're going to spend their money somewhere to be entertained. So the more that the digital component. I mean, I think the NFL has a Nickelodeon thing or a Disney thing now. I mean, they got cartoon characters. I saw something where Mo was catching a touchdown, Simpsons guy, but they're trying to incorporate and get more fans, right? Because more fans means more money. Yeah. So I think, not to nerd out X and O wise with personnel groupings and packages, but can't really tell you, it's going to be more 4-2-5 looks, move. But I think the more that the entertainment piece, I noticed it in basketball. I was watching some basketball games this weekend. They turn the lights out in the arena, and then it's like the flash. It's like a concert. Yeah. So they do it in stadiums now. They turn it out and get all this strobe stuff. So the more entertaining they can make the game with the digital components, that's where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah, the entertainment value, again, is not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger. It's one of those things you have to understand. As a GM especially, you've got to understand that's going to be a part of decisions you're probably making at some point, or you're, again, the business side of that GM seat of that front office is going to deal a lot with that, and it's only going to grow. Before we go, John, again, you won playoff games in Tennessee. You had sustained success. One of the things that maybe you don't get enough credit for in Tennessee, I was in Tennessee in 2013. I remember what that building was like. That building changed for the better. Again, you talk upgraded technology, the expansion, the construction, to where it is a gorgeous facility now. Is that something that you think back on, again, of all the spots where you're proud of the work you did, proud of the team you put together, proud of, hey, I left this place better than when I got here in, what was it, 2016, I believe, 2015?
16.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, I'm certainly proud of all the wins and the success we had from what we took over to what we turned it into. But I'm probably most proud of the impact that we had on people. Right, is because I still have people reach out to me and thank me and, hey, you really helped shape me and grow me, and I really felt like I was a part of the team, whether you were the national scout or whether you were the fifth guy in the equipment room or the fourth trainer. Like, everybody felt like we were in it together and we were working towards something. And I'm extremely appreciative of Amy and her family, and the the vision that we had to change the look and feel of the building. Because we had a conversation about, when GMs and head coaches turn over, right? And there's a new person that comes in. Every single GM and every single coach is going to get up there and talk about change. And like, we're going to change and we're going to do this and it's going to change. But when the players walk back into the building, unless you've aesthetically changed the look and feel where they go to work every day, the only thing that changed is the nameplates outside of a couple offices and the asses in those seats. So she did an outstanding job of incorporating that and getting that. And when you do that, then the players, when they walk back in, it's not lip service. It's like, wow, this really has changed. Like, this is a real thing. Well, then you can get buy-in, right? And then the players feel it, because you're not just standing at a podium and then the next guy is saying change, right? It's actually changing. So, yeah, it turned out really good. There was a lot of hard work by a lot of people, that went into that with Amy and her family certainly at the forefront.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, if you want to just look some before and after pictures of, is it one Titan place? Again, I'm, out there, the spot out on the little, with the water running around it, you got the practice fields. It was, again, seeing the pictures, knowing what it was like, again, back in 2013 to the pictures I see now, again, stick a feather in your cap. And again, you had success that a lot of GMs haven't. And again, your name is still out there, going through interviews. I believe you had at least a couple this cycle. Fully expect them to be in, your name in the cycle for the next few. And again, you didn't say no to college GM jobs. So who knows, some university presidents and ADs may be looking for your contact information now. Cause again, you left a door open and that's all it takes to start fielding some calls.
Well, maybe they catch me on my podcast, and if I get that thing going,
yeah.
I haven't come up with a name with it yet, and it really doesn't even exist yet. But it's in the bank of ideas.
Yep. We all love the bank of ideas. Again, the fact that you were humble enough to join us on our lowly podcast, Scouting the League. Again, we truly appreciate it. I was just wondering if only I could go full 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast. We could keep going. I know I could keep going. Again, it's ball. Neil and I love talking ball. At the end of the day, we're that old school football guy that again, I think our listeners probably are. I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of this one. So really appreciate it. And again, when you're ready, when it's time for the Jon Robinson podcast in whatever form, we're going to come on. We'll have you on here. We'll announce it on here, and we'll just help you run with it.
Yeah, I got to get you guys on, like Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, LaJuan and Compton. I mean, I haven't even gotten credit for those two. Those two guys. That marriage was arranged by me because we brought Compton in on the practice squad, and then now they have a multi-million-dollar pod show on an old rusty bus. Like, when he first came and told me he was doing that, I was like, "Are you crazy?" And then, looking back on it now, I'm the crazy one. I should have bought stock in it probably.
Yeah, busting with the boys and Will Compton. Some unbelievable. Again, I appreciated his impersonations of former head coach Mike Vrabel. Again, those guys are entertaining. Again, entertainment value, right? Again, Taylor Lewan, really good football player. Will Compton, good football player, had a nice NFL career. Again, a lot of fun with those guys. So that. If you put us, Neil and I, in with Theo Vaughn, Rogan, Compton, and LaJuan as podcast guys, well, we'll take that every day of the week because those guys slightly more successful than us at this point.
Maybe if you need someone to clean the toilets, we can come in for that or something, John. Maybe sweep the floors. I think the J-Rob pod has a nice ring to it. I mean, just kind of a spitball in there.
Yeah, and we're just going to shop talk, kind of like we've done here. We'll get a little bit granular, but it's like I literally was scrolling through X, and I think PFF does a great job. But they were talking about a game, and I looked, and there was like 140,000 people listening to two guys sit up there and just rattle off stats for an hour and a half, and I'm like, I mean, I could do that. I mean, I'm not going to get 140,000 people, but
it starts somewhere. Start with 140, and before you know it, it's going to be blowing up. Again, when you've at the end of the day, not a ton of people have sat where you've sat, made the decisions you've made, and there's always going to be value. Again, learning every piece, and again, we all know we're all doing this because people love football. People love football. It is, again, we are in, how long has it been since a game's been played? How long is it going to be before another real game's played at the NCAA or NFL level? And it's the market's not slowing down any. People can't get enough of it. And, good people, good football people that actually know the business are always going to have a spot in the game.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you guys do with bringing kind of the scouts, as you mentioned it, the pro scouts that are, sitting in the windowless film rooms trying to find the next guy that can help the team, or the road scout that's staying in a seedy residence inn in Jackson, Mississippi. I was there. I did that. But bringing attention to those guys and giving them the acclamation that they deserve, because they are truly the ground level, the heart and soul of team building.
Yeah, no question. The Scout Awards that Neil gave out last week at the Combine, all those BART Awards, all those Pro Department Awards, you can check Neil's Twitter. You can check my Twitter. Neil's at Inside the League. I'm at rsafootball.com. John, are you out there on X? Are you anywhere, tweeting your thoughts on all things free agency and football?
I've never sent a tweet in my life. I don't even know how to craft one. I have posted a couple of times on Instagram and Facebook. My parents are on Facebook, so I have to be on Facebook. But I try to stay off of that because I will get the rabid fan. I'm posting a picture of me and my daughter and somewhere, and just trying to be happy, and so her friends can tag her and all that kind of stuff. And somebody will complain about something, but that's the life that we live. Yeah. And I don't know that I was really looking for any football rebuttal on a Christian retreat post, but okay, if that's how you feel like you got to do, go ahead, be you.
Yeah, that's the world we live in today.
As I always say, the football fan, that is short for fanatic, and there are plenty of them out there. So when the podcast drops, again, wherever it's at, YouTube, Spotify, wherever the podcast for Jon Robinson's at, again, he'll reluctantly probably have to create a social media following. And, at that time, then, he'll have to curate and do all the, the executive producer things that a podcaster is going to have to do. Right.
I guess. I mean, I'm getting an education real time here, but I won't call it like face page or book or whatever that Belichick always called it. Now he's everywhere.
Yeah. Again, you go back to North Carolina. He's a Tar Heel for now, depending on who you believe. Again, it's a short term or long term thing, but at least he's helping change the game of football, as he has done his entire career. One of, in my opinion, the greatest head coach of all time. So we'll see how he does in Chapel Hill. But John, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate you being on with us. Agents, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file, folder, storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now.